So getting started today, we'll use some blankets to sit on. You'll want to have some yoga blocks or a yoga chair nearby as class progresses. Let's start in a comfortable seated posture. We'll sit with the legs crossed in Sukhasana, sweet or easy pose. Here, the legs are crossed near the ankles. You want to sit up high enough so that you're not feeling any strain in the hips or the back when you attempt to sit up tall. Just take a few breaths here. Notice how there is this lifting of the side ribs out of the pelvis. You can also feel a little bit of a lift from the chest, and then also a lift from the crown of the head, as if to rise the spine up towards the ceiling. For a moment, just taking a few breaths, let your elbows hang heavy towards the floor, with the palms resting on the thighs. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, turn your awareness to how your breath is affecting your body and what sensations might be coming up in your body as we get started today. Sometimes those more achy areas might stand out. Let's see if you can bring some attention to the spots that might even be dull or not so sensational. On your next inhale, bring the palms together in Namaskar. The elbows lifted slightly. Use that pressure of the palms into one another to roll the tops of the shoulders back and down the spine, creating some length in the sides of the neck, the tops of the shoulders. As you broaden the chest, pulling the shoulders back, you might even feel a stretch near the collarbones across the front of the chest. We'll start class today by chanting 3 Oms together as a group. Let's start with an inhale. Restore any lost length that might have come up subconsciously, perhaps in the back of the neck. Keeping the chest lifting, shoulders rolling back. At the end of your next exhale, bring your chin down to the chest, surrendering the head to the heart, intellect to intuition. Rest the hands on the thighs. Slowly lift your head and open the eyes. To get started, notice which leg is closest to you, and we'll switch the cross of the legs. Still in Sukhasana, sweet or easy pose. Here the legs are crossed at the ankles. We're going to start with a little twist. So to come into our twist, we're actually going to take the arms straight up and overhead. Taking a few breaths here, feeling how long the side waists get when we lift the arms up. And then on your next exhale, twist off to the left. But try to keep that lift in the side waists that you felt when the arms were up and overhead. As you come into the twist, twisting off to the left, take a few breaths here. Side waist lifting, shoulders rolling back. And if you feel comfortable doing so, you can lift your chin and look over the left shoulder. And then coming back to center, reaching the arms up and overhead. On an exhale, you can twist off to the right, bringing the hands down, but trying to keep that lift of the side ribs, the side waists. If you feel comfortable doing so, lift your chin, look over the right shoulder. And coming back to center, we'll do each side one more time. Arms up and overhead. On an exhale, bringing the hands down, twisting off to the left. You press your legs down towards the floor, lift the chest up. As you exhale, see if you can soften the abdomen and twist a little bit deeper. And then back to center, arms up and overhead, last side, last time. On a nice deep exhale, twisting off to the right. Arms come down, but notice how still that front of the armpit is lifting up. Tops of the shoulders roll back. If you feel comfortable doing so, lift the chin, look over the right shoulder. And then we'll come back to center. You can take the arms up and slowly bring the hands down and notice what's needed to keep that lift in the chest. What's needed to keep that length in the side waist to sit up nice and tall. Wonderful. So we're going to get started with some blocks or a chair. You can decide how much support would be best for you. So with two blocks, we'll set them on the medium setting, and we'll be supporting our hands in this way. I'm going to go ahead and grab my chair to have it nearby so I can demonstrate with that as well. I'll show you kind of what we're up to and where we're headed so that as we progress, you can determine if blocks or a chair would be best for you. So we'll first start with some hands on the blocks. Again, this would essentially be the same position if our hands were on the chair. If your knees are uncomfortable resting on your mat like this, it might be helpful to have a blanket under the knees as well. We're going to start just by moving the shoulders back and forth, spreading the shoulder blades apart and then squeezing them back together. And then we're going to start to roll the shoulders here. And so now they're moving in a couple of different directions. Not only are they squeezing and spreading, but they're also creating these circular rotations in the joint. And then we'll come up into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. And I'll have you guys step a foot far forward so we can come down into this almost Virabhadrasana 2 style of supported position. This is really going to tell you if a chair is more helpful. If you start to notice that that back knee is significantly bending, your back is significantly rounding, the chair will work best. We'll do this a couple of times on each side. And we might even shift it up by straightening the leg at some point. At another point, we're even going to come into Utthita Trikonasana. So we're going to have a couple of different poses interlaced through there. We'll take a couple of breaks. So to take a rest, you can take the knees wide, toes together, and sit back on the heels, Adho Mukha Virasana. That's just kind of some general foresight as to where we're headed, although it'll be a little bit more harmonized in our efforts, and we'll have breaks kind of laced throughout there. So go ahead and grab what support is best for you. Maybe it's a blanket underneath the knees. If blocks are a little bit too low for you to come into those standing postures, go ahead and grab your chair. Just make sure that your chair is completely on your mat so that it doesn't slide off when you're putting some pressure on it. We'll start in this tabletop-like position. So I have my hands on the blocks, which are on the low height. And then my knees are just underneath my hips with the toes curled under. So take a few breaths here. Just start by squeezing the shoulder blades in and then spreading them apart. And as you do this a couple of times, notice how the shoulders are coming forward. Back almost starts to round. That upper back is rounding towards the ceiling. And as you come forward, shoulder blades squeeze together. Your chest is going to go a little bit closer to the floor. So as you do this a couple of times, just start to hone your attention into the shoulder blade area. This isn't so much in the abdomen or in the chest, very specifically in the shoulder blades that we're looking to work these actions. And we're going to start to create some circles with our shoulders. So you can start by spreading the shoulder blades and then lift them towards the ears. And as you roll them back, shoulder blades squeeze together. So you keep rolling them back and down. And there's a transition. You start to pull them forward, shoulder blades spread. And so just start to create some circles with the shoulders here. And then we'll do the other rotation. So rolling them forward. Just start to identify that movement. What's needed to create that circle. Notice when the shoulder blades are squeezing and spreading. Then we'll stop by taking the shoulder blades together and down the back. So the shoulder blades squeeze in towards each other. As the shoulders move away from the ears, you're gonna feel like that upper back area gets a little bit more strong, a little bit more effortful. And we'll come into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. So now the wrists are slightly forward from the shoulders, knees are slightly back from the hips. Curl the toes under and lift the hips up. You can keep the heels lifting off the floor. And as you lift the heels, lift the hips up nice and high. Try and lift every inch of your sit bone up towards the ceiling as much as possible. And notice what's happening in the shoulders. Keep the shoulder blades squeezing towards each other and moving down the spine. We're going to start by taking that right foot forward. You're going to bend the right knee, lift it forward, and try and get it in line with your block or the front leg of your chair. We'll have that front knee at a 90-degree angle. So we really want the knee to be directly over the ankle, directly over the heel. So take a few breaths here. Try to straighten your back leg, making it stick straight by squeezing the top of the thigh. You're also trying to press that top of the thigh up towards the ceiling. And then we'll move back into Adho Mukha Svanasana. So bending that foot back, heels lifted, hips lifting high. And moving to the other side. So left foot forward, bending the knee, reaching that foot forward near your block or the leg of the chair. Just making sure that that left knee is directly over the heel. Trying to straighten the back leg as much as possible here. As you take a few breaths, there's kind of this weighing of the hips down towards the floor while the back leg is straight. And then back into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. We're gonna do each side one more time before we take a break. So right foot forward. You can see if it can move a little bit farther forward than it did the last time. If not, that's totally fine. Keeping that back leg straight. Few breaths as you weigh the hips down towards the floor, opening up the inner groin, inner thighs. Back into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. Last side, last time before we take a break. Left foot forward. So back leg is straight, try and sink the hips towards the floor, opening the hips up. And then Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog, keeping the hips lifted, side waist long, and you can come down to rest, taking the knees wide, toes together, and sitting back on the heels. Having the palms on the blocks or the chair, and turn your palms towards each other so that the pinky side of the palm is pressing into the block. And as you try to nail that side of the hand down, nail the outer wrist down, turn your inner arms up, outer arms to the floor. And then you can come back up into Adho Mukha Svanasana. Very similar protocol this time, except we'll straighten that front leg. So from Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog, take the right foot forward, left foot back. Just taking a few breaths, opening the hips up towards the ceiling. And then as you press your right foot into the floor, try and lift your right hip back to the wall behind you. And as you press into the heel, press into the big toe ball mount. Try to straighten both legs. Back heel is still lifted off the floor. This is almost like a wide Parsvottanasana, which is the intense stretch of the side or the flank pose. Just like we practiced earlier, that lifting of the side waist as if we were reaching the hands forward. See if you can create that in your torso now. So even though that right hip is moving back, the chest, the armpits are still trying to lift forward to make the side waist nice and straight. If you notice that your back is rounding here and you're not able to get that lift and that length forward, might be beneficial to start working on a chair. And we'll bend that right knee, coming into this low lunge position and back into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. And taking the left foot forward, right foot back, low lunge position, sinking the hips towards the floor, straightening the right thigh. You can start to press that left foot down and back as you lift the left hip behind you. Notice how that left foot, it can press down into the floor and almost scrub forward. But instead, see if you can actually scrub it back towards your back leg rather than forward. And as that left hip moves back, lift the chest forward so the side waists are nice and long, the legs straight. And then back into that low lunge position. And returning to Adho Mukha Svanasana. And then we can come down and take a rest for a moment. Knees wide, toes together, sitting back on the heels. Adho Mukha Virasana. Downward facing hero's pose. With your palms on the blocks, you can let the head hang if that's comfortable for you. And then coming back into Adho Mukha Svanasana. This time we'll come into Utthita Trikonasana from our low lunge. So it's very similar to what we're doing or what we've already done. So you can go ahead and just follow my lead with me. From Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. Take your right foot forward, starting in that low lunge and straightening the front leg, just like we practiced before. So you press that right foot down, try and scrub it back to the wall behind you, back towards that left foot. Now you're gonna start to turn yourself, bringing that left heel down to the floor, turning your rib cage up towards the ceiling for Utthita Trikonasana now, extended triangle pose. With your left hand on your hip, pull the elbow back, open the chest up. Notice what both shoulders are doing. Roll the shoulders back and down the spine so the shoulder blades are squeezing together. And if you feel comfortable in the neck to do so, reach the left arm up and overhead. Maybe even take the gaze up towards the ceiling. And then bringing that left hand back down, back into that Parsvottanasana position, both legs straight, chest towards the blocks or your chair. Then returning to that low lunge position before stepping back into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. So you lift the heels, lift the hips up high. If your heels do come to the floor in Adho Mukha Svanasana, use that pressure of your heels to lift the hips up even more. And then next side, so taking the left foot forward, that low lunge position, back leg straight, weighing the hips towards the floor, and straighten the left leg. Both legs are straight. Try and scrub the feet towards each other. So as the left foot presses down, should be trying to slide and scrub back to the wall behind you. There's what we call an isometric pressure, meaning that your foot's not actually going to move, but you're going to feel a little bit of a change muscularly as you try and slide it back. Now we're going to move into Utthita Trikonasana. So turning that right foot down, rib cage up towards the ceiling with the right hand on your hip. Taking a few breaths here. So again, this is where you can decide if you need a chair or you need some higher support for your hand. And if you feel comfortable in the neck and shoulders to do so, reach the right arm up and overhead. Maybe even turn the gaze up towards the ceiling. And then bringing that hand down into that Parsvottanasana position. So now the toes point forward, chest points forward. Then into the low lunge, left knee bends. And then stepping back into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. Taking a few breaths here, and then coming down to rest. Knees wide, toes together. The hands on the blocks, there's a little bit more space so that the spine can lengthen forward rather than just down to the floor. So take a few breaths here, anchoring the hips back towards the heels. As you press your shins, tops of the feet down to the floor, try and scrub your knees forward, sinking the hips down. As you breathe, now the side waists have to lift from the hips, as if to extract the low back away from the hips. With every inhale and every exhale, find that there's that lengthening. And as the hips sink back, the whole low back, the side waists are lifting up towards the armpits, out of the hips. Just when you think you can't lift anymore, really tune into your inhale and exhale. Let's see what else you can access. And then you can push yourself up into that tabletop position. And so now if you haven't been using a chair yet, then you're going to need to get one, because we're going to move into a couple a little bit more restful standing postures. And the chair is a very nice addition to that. You can also grab some bolsters or blankets to place on top of the chair if, number one, it's not high enough, or number two, if you just want some comfort. I'm going to demonstrate where we're headed so you know what we're going to do, and then we're going to do it together. So we're going to start in Parsvottanasana. We're going to start standing here with the feet together and lean forward towards your chair. I'm going to step my right foot back just to demonstrate here. Now I want to get to a point where I can actually rest my forearms here on the chair. I'm not just resting down and hunkering down towards my legs or down to the seat of the chair, but instead I want to find that my spine and my chest are actually trying to charge forward. So as we get the forearms down, we can let the head hang, but it's not just to rest the arms or the chest. Instead, we're looking for this constant lift and length to happen in the side waists. So this is where another bolster might be handy. We'll do the other side, and then once we've done each side, we're going to come back down into Uttanasana, intense stretch pose. And this is where some additional support might be helpful. You don't necessarily want to feel too much stretch in the insert of the hamstring, the belly of the hamstring. That's okay, that's a good stretch, but not really in the insert or the top groin of the hamstring. So if you need some more support to rest the head and the forearms, then that can be quite helpful. Same concept here. We're not just trying to drop to the floor and get as low as we can. Instead, we want to feel that there's this constant length that we're looking to find as we try and pull the low back, pull the side waists away from the hips here in Uttanasana. Gravity definitely adds a nice touch to experiencing that sensation. And then we'll come into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. So you can just take your hands onto the edge of the chair, walk the feet back, and we'll be here before moving on with class. Okay? That's where we're headed. So you can have some blankets nearby, maybe even have a bolster nearby in case that extra height is helpful for you. Let's start in Parsvottanasana. So hands come to the chair, feet are together, where the toes are just underneath the front of the seat. And we'll start by taking the right foot back, about 3.5 to 4 feet. The toes do point off towards the upper outer corner of your mat. If you notice that there's any tension in the low back specifically, or you feel like you have something going on with your sacrum, you can take the back toes pointing straight forward. But traditionally, the toes are pointing off at a slight angle here. As you take a few breaths, try and press the feet into the floor and slide them towards each other. And eventually, we bring the forearms down to the chair, but let it be a little bit farther forward. So notice that the forearms and the elbows aren't directly under the shoulders. Instead, as they rest, they're almost pulling the chest forward. And you can let the head hang. As you try and straighten the legs, sliding the feet towards each other, take a nice deep inhale and exhale. And observe what you can do to lengthen the side waists, specifically to lift that left side waist out of your hip as your left hip moves back. Every breath brings another layer of deepening into that extraction. And then you can bring your hands back underneath you so the arms are straight. Step the back foot forward. And left foot back. Right foot forward. About 3.5 to 4 feet of space between the heels. Back toes point towards the upper outer corner of your mat. Unless you have something going on with the pelvis or the sacrum that might need some more alignment and symmetry. I'm not talking very much when we get into this pose because I want you to try and focus on your breath. Focus on that constant lift of the sideways forward. Notice how there's this deepening of length and of that back hip, or the hip on the front leg rather, as you breathe. And bringing that back foot forward. We'll do each side one more time before moving into Uttanasana. Right foot back. And as that left hip pulls towards the wall behind you, lift the chest, lift the left side waist up and away from that thigh. Remember, we're not trying to take the chest towards the floor or towards the shin. Instead, we're trying to lift it forward towards the wall in front of us. And stepping the feet together. Last side, last time. Left foot back, right foot forward. Scrubbing the feet towards each other to keep that stability in the legs. And stepping the back foot forward. You can step back just slightly. so that the heels are directly underneath the hips. And you're resting your forearms on the chair. You can even cross your forearms and let the head hang forward. Here we are in Uttanasana now. Taking a few breaths. So the hips lift up. Notice now how gravity can add this natural shift in the spine. And then heel toe your step apart from each other. So you're gonna take your feet as wide as the mat now. Toes turn in slightly. Let's gently lengthen your inhale and exhale. Notice how there's a little bit more effort in the legs, but the upper body can just fall with gravity. Side waists falling towards the floor, towards the chair. As the thighs press back, the chest lifts forward. See if you can try to lift from the low back. So it's not just the chest that's pulling the side waists. There is some effort in the low back to extract itself from the hips. Every breath, trying to feel some new length in the side ribs and the side waists. And we want to keep that length as we come into downward facing dog. So hands are on the chair. Step your feet back, still having the feet wide. Downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Press the palms down, press the thighs back. And then we'll step the feet forward. Can grab some props to sit on. So keep your chair nearby. We're gonna come into a couple of seated postures and forward folds. So now you're gonna need some props to sit on. It's also nice to have some support on the chair, perhaps a blanket or two, maybe even a bolster so that we can rest the head and the arms on. Now we really have to tune in, especially with our own home practice. We have to tune into the support that we need to actually access some sense of effortless effort. Effortless effort really comes just with a longer term practice, abhyasa, that when you commit to a practice for a longer period of time, that aspect that seems so effortful at one point becomes a little bit more effortless. I'm going to turn sideways so that you can just see for a moment where we're headed and what we're really looking to access here in the back and in the hips. So we'll start coming into Paschimottanasana with the legs wide. So that's a forward fold with the legs wide. Now, if I didn't have my chair and I started to move forward, it's very easy to get this rounding in the low back. And I know I'm not wearing the best shirt for this, but essentially it even looks like my low back is still connected to my hips. It's rounding to the wall behind me. And instead, what we're looking to do is see that we can extract and start to pull that lower spine up and forward out of the hips. And again, I'm not just trying to get down to my thighs and my shins in order to complete the pose, but instead I'm trying to grow forward, trying to feel some length in the side waist, depth of the hips. And eventually we get to a place of just laying down on the thighs. So this is why we're going to be using a chair today, is to have the legs on the inside of the chair. We want to feel like there's enough support so that we can really just tune into the breath and tune into what's subtly happening here in the low back and in the hip area. So it's important to acknowledge, okay, if the back is stuck in the hips, then that's where more support is going to be beneficial. If you feel that the chair gives you enough support with just a blanket on it and you can really access that lift, then great. Otherwise, it can be helpful to have a bolster or even a little bit of a higher stack of blankets on that chair. But we do want to use that extra support as opposed to using blocks. So definitely have a chair rather than blocks today. Paschimottanasana, so you'll have the chair on top of the shins or over the shins. Legs are inside the chair legs. I'm sitting high enough so that before I bend forward, I feel like I can sit upright and there's no achiness in the low back here. And then you can take the arms forward, rest your head on the edge of the blanket or on your forearms so that you can still breathe through the nose. Now here in Paschimottanasana, we don't have that blessing of gravity to help pull our spine and extract it out of the hips. So here we have to use our breath. As you inhale and exhale, press the thighs down, lift the chest up. It's going to give you an initial sense of direction that we're headed. But then we have to look at the next layer, look a little bit deeper, observing how can we lift the lower spine? How can we lift the low back out of the hips? Again, the general direction is up and forward rather than towards the thighs or towards the shins. As you take a few breaths, you might notice that it's possible to slide the chair a little bit farther away from you, but that's really only going to happen after a few moments of getting that feeling down, building that awareness of what's needed to lift and extract the low back out of the hips. So during these next few breaths, I want you to just focus on your pose, just focus on those sensations in the body. Start to notice if the left or the right side is any different from the other. And then we're going to come back up to sit and move into Janu Shirshasana, so head of the knee pose. I'll demonstrate just really briefly and then we can do together. I'm going to hook near my thigh and knee, taking my left leg off to the side and underhooking the ankle, turning the top of the foot down. And normally, traditionally, the heel comes to the root of its own thigh. This is a little bit too much for the ankle or for the knee or for the hip. You can just bring that heel to the inner right thigh. So I'm going to turn slightly. I can see that you guys aren't able to see my feet very well in that angle. So again, here, top of the shin is down to the floor, top of the foot is down, heel normally will come out to the root of its own thigh, very, very much so taking that leg back. But if that's a little bit too much, or you find that the knee is lifting off the floor, you can bring that heel into the root of the right thigh. Janu Shirshasana, head of the knee pose, still using that chair to lean forward on. Okay, Let's go ahead and start by taking the left leg off to the side, hooking underneath the knee really close to the thigh. As the knee comes off to the side, you can underhook the ankle so that you can turn the top of the shin down to the floor a little bit more easily. And you can place that heel in line with the root of the right thigh, opposite thigh. And as you take a few breaths here with your hands on your chair, really trying to sit upright before resting, notice and integrate what you observed in Paschimottanasana, the last forward bend that we practiced. There's a little bit more symmetry from left to right. And you can cross the forearms, rest your head on your arms or a blanket stack. Now, as you take a few breaths, just observe how there's a little bit of a different quality to this pose. Often the side with the bent knee might feel a little bit longer. But see if you can draw in that same practice that you applied in Paschimottanasana to the right side. Essentially, the right side of our body is still in that last pose that we practiced. And so with every inhale and every exhale, trying to create space between the armpit and the hips. Not only is it the chest that's lifting forward, but try to assess how can you start to lift the low back out of the hips, starting to extract that area away from the legs. If you find that the side waists are lengthening, that the hips are deepening, you can start to slide your chair forward just a little bit so that we have that forward length. And as you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, breathe into the sides of the rib cage. And we'll start to come up so you can do the other side. As you come up to sit, and you'll bring that left leg up, straightening it forward. And we'll switch to the right side. Hooking underneath the right thigh near the knee, pulling the leg off to the side, and underhooking the ankle so we can turn the top of the shin down to the floor. Heel comes to either the root of its own thigh, maybe the root of the opposite thigh, whichever is most comfortable for you today. Sitting up nice and tall, keeping that length in the side waist as you lean forward. You can even hold on to the top rail of your chair. And this is just going to be a nice reminder to keep the side waists long, lifting upward. And then we want to maintain that if we cross the forearms. We still want to feel that the side waists, that the low back are lifting away from the hips, from the pelvis to create length in the spine. It's natural to feel that there's a difference from left to right. That there's a certain aspect of symmetry that might be missing. So as you a little bit more actively lift and lengthen the left side of the body, try to even that length out so that both side waists feel equally long. And then as you find that space and that length, you might be able to scoot the chair forward inch by inch. But rather than just resting the head or the arms on the blankets and on the chair, try to find that lift and length all the way from the low back. We don't have that same sensation of gravity like we did when we were standing. But think about what that felt like and how can we implement that same sensation here. Same sensation that the spine, side waist, the low back can all lengthen away from the hips. It can all lengthen away from the press of the thigh down. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, breathe into the sides of the rib cage, the side waists. Keeping the side waist lifted, come up to sit. We'll do Paschimottanasana one more time. Bringing that leg up, straightening the legs forward. Keeping the chest nice and tall. And hold on to the top rails of the chairs. You bend forward. Sometimes people experience that the low back feels a little bit achy. Feels like it's working a little bit more than it might normally work. That's okay. The thighs press down, the chest lift up. You might find space to lean forward slightly, but that's really not the end goal. End goal is to have that upward lift sensation in the side waists and the low back. And that ability to lean forward comes from that lift and that length up. Every inhale and exhale, try to extract the low back from the hips. To inhale, the chest lifts up. To exhale, the abdomen can draw in and create a powerful lift. Even though I'm talking softly, that we're in this more passive forward bend, be serious about the effort. And then you'll come back up to sit, sitting up nice and tall. You take the hands next to the hips for a moment. And as you press the fingertips down, lifting the chest up. And we're going to shift to a little supported back bend. We start to move into Shavasana. You can set your chair off to the side. You can have your blankets off to the side, but perhaps maybe one of them stays within an arm's reach, so you can place it underneath the head for Shavasana. What we're going to do is use two blocks. One of them is going to sit off to the side, and we'll use it for the next pose. Second one, we're actually going to have within an arm's reach. Again, the blanket is just off to the side for now. It's waiting for us to use for Shavasana. So I'll demonstrate what we're up to in the sequence, because once you lay down, you're going to stay laying down, and I don't want you to have to worry about looking at me or looking at the screen. Just take a moment right now to watch for a second. I'm going to start with my feet flat on the floor, and I'm going to lay down. From here, we're going to practice bridge pose really briefly, since we did so many forward bends. I'm going to press my feet down, tuck the shoulders underneath me. As I lift my hips up, I can grab the block and place it right underneath my tailbone. You can decide if it's on the low, medium, or maybe even the high setting if you've practiced this before. I have mine on the medium height. So I have my tailbone supported and I'm straightening the legs. We'll be here for a few breaths. And when we come out, we're going to move into Baddha Konasana. So I'm going to lift my hips up, pull the block out. Now I want one block on each side of me. I'm going to bring my feet together, knees wide, and I want to angle these blocks just slightly. So my leg isn't resting on the hard edge of the block. Instead, as I angle the block, you're going to feel that the legs aren't necessarily stretching very much. This is a very supported Supta Baddha Konasana. I'm not feeling a stretch in the inner thighs. Instead, my legs are very supported. So again, the blocks are angled. This is when you can grab your blanket. You feel that would add a little bit more comfort to your practice and your pose. We'll be here for a few breaths. You're welcome to stay in this posture through Shavasana, or if you'd rather remove the blocks and straighten the legs to let go of everything everywhere, then that'll be an option as well. After that, we'll roll to the side and we'll all come up to close class. So to get started, you can have your blanket nearby, have two blocks nearby. Coming into bridge pose initially. So feet are flat on the floor. You can bring your elbows down to the floor and then lay down. So the spine is flat. So you grab onto the side edges of your mat, tuck your shoulders underneath you. So inner arms up, outer arms down, and press the feet down and lift the hips up. Tuck your tailbone towards your knees. And grab your block, you can place it on the low, medium, or high setting. You should place the block so that it's lengthwise in line with the spine, but it's just under the tailbone. And whichever height you're on, and you can take a few breaths there and straighten one leg at a time. So you straighten the legs. For today, the toes point up towards the ceiling. Just taking a few breaths here. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, fill the sides of the rib cage. Fill the upper outer corners of your chest. Let the face and the eyes be soft. And then from here, you can bring your feet in, lift the hips up, and remove the block from underneath you. You have one block on each side of you. You'll turn it on to that medium height and walk your feet together. Bottoms of the feet are facing each other. Knees go wide, but you're going to take your blocks and slant them, tilt them sideways near your hips and your thighs. And they're supporting the thigh right near the hip, but they are slanted so that you don't feel the edge of the block in the thigh. Instead, it's one of the flat portions of the block that's supporting the thigh. Now, this is not necessarily meant to be a big stretch in the hips. You should feel more supported in the legs than anything here. This should be for the legs to rest. You can grab that blanket to place underneath your head if you would like. As you take a few breaths, rest the hands on the floor. Starting to let go of everything, everywhere. You're welcome to stay in this position for Shavasana, or you can remove the blocks and straighten the legs for a more traditional Shavasana, corpse pose. Whichever one you choose, feels though you can let go of everything everywhere. Gently lengthening and deepening your inhale and exhale. Notice how the floor, how the props are supporting your weight. As you exhale, try to release your weight completely into that support, allowing your body to weigh heavier and heavier with each breath. Notice when the mind wanders, gently bringing it back to your body, back to your breath. Take a little bit of a deeper inhale and exhale, letting go of any subconscious tension that might have risen. And slowly place your hands on your abdomen, taking this moment to appreciate your body for all that it's done, all that it will do. Appreciate your mind for taking the time to practice and harmonize with your body. And feel gratitude for your heart, that organ in your chest that's dedicated to life. You can take your time coming up. Start by bending the knees, taking your right arm up and overhead. As you roll to your right side, feel free to take a few breaths here with your head resting on your arm. Whenever you're ready, push yourself up to a comfortable seated posture, using the props around you to sit comfortably. I appreciate you all for taking the time to practice yoga today. Thank you for practicing with me. Namaste. Well, thank you for joining me. It's great to have you. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know or reach out. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day.